Hello boys and girls. If you're watching this video today, that means that you were absent yesterday when we talked about elements of plot. This is the interactive notebook activity that we did in class yesterday. So please follow along with your notebook and make sure that you know exactly what you need to do to get this done today. The first thing that you should have gotten was this worksheet right here that shows you the elements of plot, the different vocabulary words. You're going to need to cut out all of the edges of this worksheet. After you cut that out, you are also going to need to cut along these lines right here. Make sure you don't cut all the way though, because you do want this to become a flap. So you're going to cut across all of these pieces right here. Go ahead and pause the video now so that you can do that, and then replay when you're ready to move on. Okay, now that you have cut out all these pieces, you're ready to glue. So you're going to turn the paper over and glue just along this siding piece right here. And then you're going to glue it down into your notebook so that you have fully functioning tabs just like I do on my paper right here. So go ahead and pause the video again, glue in the thing, and then you'll be ready to move on. Okay. So now that we've moved on from that, let's talk about the vocabulary words in the elements of plot. First of all, the plot is the order of the story. Make sure that you write these notes down on your notebook so that you have an idea of plot before you come back to the next lesson. So the plot is the order of the story. Now, plot is found in any fiction story. There usually is not a plot in an informational or nonfiction story because those are just telling us facts. A fiction story is telling us a story or a journey of a character, and so there's always an order in the story of those books. The first element of plot is the exposition. So if you fold your tab up right here, I have some notes written in here that you can go ahead and do as well, and I'm going to zoom you in so that you can see that a little bit better. So the exposition is the beginning of the story. It's usually the introduction, and the introduction always introduces the characters, the setting, and if there are any background stories that we need to know about the characters. So go ahead and make sure that you have these notes written in under the flap for exposition. The exposition is very important to the story because if the story did not set itself up in the beginning, you would be really confused as to who the characters were. You wouldn't really get a good idea for their personalities and their character traits. And this is where it really lets you in on who the characters are, where the setting takes place, and if there's any background stories. So the next element in our plot diagram is the inciting incident. Most of the time the inciting incident will actually happen within the exposition. The inciting incident is the event that starts the rising action. It is the event that sets off the whole story. So if you think about the book that we're reading for our read aloud, the Dragon's Guide to the Care and Feeding of Humans, the inciting incident for that story would be when Winnie and Miss Drake meet for the first time, because after they meet, they start having fun adventures together. So it's the event that starts out the story. Now, the next step in our plot diagram is the rising action. The rising action are the events that lead to the climax. It's usually when things start getting worse and worse and worse for the character. This is the main part of the story. Most of the story will take place in the rising action. Even if you think about a TV show, when you're watching an episode of your favorite show, the whole time the episode is happening is usually when something crazy is going on for the character. And then by the end of the story, the character resolves their problems, everything is fine, goes back to normal, and then the episode ends. So this is the main part of the story. This is what moves the plot along. And like I said, most of the time, some complications will arise. Then we get to the climax, and the reason why I have drawn an arrow on top of this right here is because the plot actually kind of looks like a mountain, where, you know, we're starting out with the exposition and we rise and rise and rise with the rising action until we hit the very peak of the mountain, which is the climax. The climax is the most intense part of the story. It is the part that gets the most exciting. Usually this sparks a turning point for the character. If there's some kind of a problem that the character is facing, or there's a dilemma, this is usually where that doesn't resolve itself, but this is usually where they find a solution. Like we said, it's the most intense part of the story. Immediately following the climax is the falling action. Now, if you notice, the words, the rising action and the falling action, are very similar. It's because the falling action is just the opposite of the rising action. It's where the events start to decrease. They follow right after the climax, and this is where they start to wrap things up. This is where, you know, the problems start to get solved and everybody starts to go back to normal. And then finally, at the end of the story, we have the resolution. This is where the problem is solved. It's the end of the story. The loose ends are tied up. The character doesn't have a problem anymore, and everything is happily ever after. Now, sometimes in a story, there will not be a resolution. That's what we call a cliffhanger. If you've ever read a book or watched a movie where maybe it's a series, there's more than one, it's because they want to leave you without a resolution so that there is a next book for you to be interested in. So not every story has a resolution. All right, now I also gave you this little piece of paper. This is your cheat sheet. You can turn your paper over in your notebook and glue this down anywhere that you'd like, up in the corner, in the middle, wherever you want. This is just a quick review of all the things that we talked about on the plot diagram. It's just a nice quick notes for you. So make sure you glue that into your notebook. Okay, so now you are all caught up on plot. So you are ready to join back in our lesson, and you are ready to do our practice with plot today.